so, there's a lot of beauty that comes from living in, rural areas. It can be really attractive to a lot of people who just want to break from the city or the suburbs. But, unless you've lived in a rural area or at least been plugged in quite a bit, if you will, to rural life, there might be some things you have not even considered about the difference between the city and living rurally. My name's Forth, and I've been in real estate for over 23 years. I come from a ranching family. I grew up as a ranch kid and lived with wells and septics and dirt roads and all my life. And so I've been in real estate the last 23 years, and I really like helping people move rurally. And a lot of times people are moving from the city, especially lately. After COVID, there's so many people that can work at home now. It's really helped our values in rural America, but then it's getting kind of crowded out here. But I wanted to talk about today just the differences that you've got to look out for, the things you need to be aware of between, suburbs and the city and living out in the country. And, it seems like most of the time, the people that I talk to, anyway, in my experience, most of the time people have already lived here. Maybe they grew up out here, or they remember going to their grandpa's during the summer, and so they have that experience. They have that base and those memories that they want to come back to it. And a lot of what drives that is just the quiet and the calm and the a little bit slower pace of life. What I enjoy about it is, and what I can't get over when I do have to stay in town, is just the quietness of it. You wake up and there's just nothing. There's absolutely no sound. And when you get used to that, it's hard to go back. Listen to the quiet and the absolute void. I call it the void of sound. That it's almost like if you concentrate on it, your ears, I don't know if they ring, but there is a sound there, but it's not man-made. It's not made by animals. It's not. I don't know what it is, but it's you only hear that out here. The other thing that's awesome is at night you can see all the stars. You can where the Milky Way should be. You can look there, and there it is. Every day, every night. And then in the springtime, there's babies everywhere. The deer and the quail, even the baby rabbits, jackrabbits and stuff. It's just there's nothing like it. As great as rural living sounds, though, there's definitely things that are challenging out here, and it's kind of a trade-off, and you have to be aware of that and be ready for that and be willing to pay that trade-off price. The biggest thing is just the distance, the isolation. Forgetting to get milk on the way home from work can be a big deal. Even if you're only just a few minutes out of the city, it's different out here in the services too. There's no municipal water. Typically you've got to have a well, unless you live in an area where there's water districts or irrigation districts that also have rural water. There's no sidewalks. We all have septic systems instead of sewer. We all have pressure tanks, and some of us have storage tanks. Depending on the volume of water that your well produces, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you're going to have to learn. But it isn't something you're going to learn it. You don't have to, like I tell this story on my girlfriend a lot. She moved out here, so she's from San Jose and always loved horses. Spent as much time and money growing up, spending time with horses as she possibly could. Had a wonderful career, and for some reason she decided she was going to adopt a horse. And the horse happened to be in our area here, in Cool and Pilot Hill, Coloma, in that area. So she was coming over here almost every weekend to ride and take lessons and be with this horse. And the more she did that for a couple of years, and the more she was over here, the more comfortable she felt with it. At first it was like, so foreign, she couldn't see herself living here. But as time went on, pretty soon she starts looking for places, and she found a place and moved here, and didn't really know that much. She didn't know much about wells and septics and all that stuff, but now she does. She's like the neighborhood go-to for certain things like that. She knows who to talk to if your well quits turning on, or the little details that you don't think of sometimes can be like scary when you first come across a problem, like the power goes out here all the time. If you don't know that and you're not ready for that, you've got to have a generator. somehow, some way, you've got to have a generator, or everything in your freezer is going to thaw out. Doesn't take long, and sometimes we're out of power for days up here. That's just one of the things you got to kind of know about. There's very limited. There's no public transportation out here. There's fewer employment opportunities. You're going to feel isolated. You're going to feel, but if you enjoy that, and you know that going in, and that's what you're looking for. There's a lot of people that's the reason. I joke that coming from the city out to here is like going to the Midwest in 30 minutes. Everybody's different. Life is different. It's a different feel, and we get to do that every night. It's like going on vacation every night, right? To us. And if you're into that, come on, But if that isn't what turns your crank, then you probably aren't gonna be happy out here. And that's the other thing that's so cool about out here, is that neighbors are really, really, really important. Really important. You've got to rely on each other. Things happen, and there's nobody else to call. And your neighbor might be a mile away, or a half a mile away, or they're not 8 feet away, and there might only be 1 or 2 of them, not a whole neighborhood of them. And that typically when you live out here, it's another big part of being out here is that our love for animals and living with animals, and whether they're your pets or your livestock or just the wild animals that are around when you're here. If you do have livestock and pets, those animals have to eat, and so that's another reason that people move out here, is to teach their kids how to do chores, how to teach their kids responsibility, and keep them away from some of the things that go on in the urban centers and the urban neighborhoods. Everybody knows where their kids are out here at all times, it seems like to me, and they know what they're doing. They know who they're with. It's like going back in time a little bit. So one of the things that I love out here is just the fact that I can do whatever I want, and nobody's going to get on me. I joke 5 o'clock in the morning, go outside and pee off the porch, and nobody knows the difference, right? Nobody cares. So it's worth it. You just have to be able to put up with the worst parts of the lifestyle and be willing to make that trade. The trade-offs of convenience, the trade-offs of even safety. Because if you get hurt out here and nobody's around, it can be a bad deal. If nobody's home with the neighbors, your phone's dead, and you just broke your femur because the tractor rolled over on you. You know what I mean? Things do happen out here, and that's part of the deal. You just have to be aware of that. You don't have to put yourself in those situations. You can live out here and be totally safe, but if you live out here, 9 times out of 10, you're the kind of person that wants to do those kind of things. And so I say that just to say that being aware of the subtle changes, the subtleties of you're going to have the same friends, you're going to go do the same things, but it's a further drive. So one of the things that people don't realize is that there's no natural gas out here. There's propane, but you either own the propane tank or you lease the propane tank from the same propane company that delivers it. And you're not limited to buying propane just from that source. However, you are paying rental to that source. Now, most of the time, and you're the ones responsible to monitor that. They're not going to come out and check it. There's no meter readers. You have to kind of be aware of when you need to order more propane, and that stuff's expensive, and you don't just order a few gallons at a time. Normally you'll order several hundred gallons, and you got a budget for that. The other thing is, longer commutes, obviously, and not only to work, but to everything you need to do, to the doctor, to the grocery store, to the dentist, to school. There's the distances are, it's not just time, it's mileage on your car, it's tires, it's brake jobs, there's a lot, that distance equates to a lot of different things that affect your bottom line and affect everything. The other thing is that the entertainment. Now, if you live in the country, you enjoy things like going fishing or taking a walk or working in your yard or painting the barn, or there's not that you find things to do that aren't available in town, but then vice versa. If you don't enjoy that kind of stuff, then this isn't the place. This isn't the right place for you. And no harm, no foul, right? There's a lot of people that grow up I know a few people that grow up in the country and don't ever want to come back because it's hard. There's especially when you're young and you're trying to get somewhere and really bearing down on your career. short nights, long days, working hard, or even kids in college. It's hard to have the lifestyle in the country and be that busy, because it does take commitment, and it takes time, and it takes it has to be a priority, or it isn't going to get done. And what I mean by that is that there are times in your life, perhaps, that it works best to live in town, to live in an apartment, or there's some of the other challenging situations here. There's the roads aren't as good. Sometimes there's no shoulders. They're windy, curvy roads. They can be dark. There's not a lot of traffic, so you run off the road, you might be there for several hours before somebody else comes along, depending on what time of day it is. But even though these things make life a little more difficult out here, those difficulties to some people are what draws us to live out here. Those are the things that make it worth it. Make the lifestyle what it is. It's almost like there's more to do, but you can do it so slow. Everything's a slower pace out here. One of the things that's so important living rurally is your neighbors, and being a good neighbor means you're going to probably have good neighbors. You know what I mean? Being willing to help, being willing to ask for help, just being open and maybe humble, maybe not so prideful that it's hard for you. You don't want it to be hard to call somebody and say, "Hey, look, my car won't start. Can you come to give me a jump?" Because you call Trey out here, it's going to be 2 or 3 hours at least. I've waited longer than that. Those are the things that you need to think about, and have alternatives for, like your own charger, or battery charger, or always have a backup battery, or have a tractor that you can start and jump your car, whatever. Right? Getting back to the neighbors, we've got neighbors that we don't really know that much about, but we love them. We get along with them. They would do anything for us. We might not even vote the same. We might not have the same religious experiences or the same religious beliefs, but they're our neighbors, right? So so there's things that we do share in common. We don't want dust on dusty roads. We want people to drive slow. We want to keep everybody's animals in. We want to watch out for predators. When the mountain lions come around, we let each other know. And so the rural lifestyle, in a way, it has, people are more important out here than if we were living in town, in a way. I mean, not to say they're more important. But you've got to be more willing to ask for help and more willing to pitch in, because you only get what you give. What comes around goes around. It's so true. And in a way, living out here is probably like it was, thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago. It's more about helping people out and knowing what your neighbors are working on, what they're trying to get accomplished, and being willing to pitch in and give ideas. And there's a lot of talking, a lot of visiting, a lot of gossip, we'll just call it visiting. Lots of that goes on out here. So being a good neighbor is a little bit like being in a family. You don't have to everybody align on everything. You don't have to have exactly the same beliefs and the same values even, but you're neighbors and you need each other a lot of times. Being a great neighbor doesn't mean you have to agree with each other on everything, but you still have to be, willing to be a good neighbor. So like I say, to me, it's a little bit like being in a family. In a family, people might totally get on your nerves, but they're still family, and you still love them, and you do whatever you can for them. That's how I do. That's how our families are, anyway. And that kind of is how I look at being a good neighbor. The other limiting factor that comes to mind is many times, especially the last 15, 20 years, some insurance policies and healthcare policies require people to live in certain zip codes in order to be near, their providers. And so that's another thing just to be aware of, just to make sure that, for instance, sometimes, depending on your situation, who you're working for, but sometimes when you retire, your provider becomes, that you have to switch providers, and many times people don't realize that. And so those are just little things that you need to be aware of. That sometimes it's, you might move out here and retire in 4 years and realize that you got to move back, and that has happened totally. So the other thing to talk about is most of the time people do have some kind of a tie to the rural life. They've either lived it in the past, or they've visited family enough, or good friends that they've spent time out here and they understand it, such that they're not afraid of it. Sometimes, though, people have goals that require you live rural, and they don't really zero in on what they're going to need to know in order to live rurally. What I mean by that is, for instance, if you love horses and you want to have horses or animals, or you want to breed dogs, the most important thing is, if you're thinking about it, you've got an itch that you can't scratch or whatever, you really think you're going to like it out here, spend some time out here and spend some time in the communities, spend some time with the people that already live out here. You can join social media groups just to get as involved as you can without living here. And then just make sure that you ask lots of questions. You'll learn whether or not it's going to be worth it, or, in your situation, because it is a trade-off. So the last thing I'd want to say is this: if you're wanting to come back to the country or start a brand new journey, into the unknown, there might be something driving your curiosity. But no matter what, no matter how much you feel like you don't know, if it's important enough to you, don't be afraid that you don't know enough. If you want it bad enough, you'll figure it out, right? So if you've got questions about living out here, or if you need more details, or if there's something you think I've missed, or that I did miss, if there's something I didn't talk about that you have questions on, get a hold of me. Let's talk. I'd love to help and help you decide whether this is the right life for you.